Welcome to today's episode. This past week has seen many groups arrive in Israel to volunteer and to help. It is so inspiring to see. So before anything else, I want to say thank you for coming. We appreciate it. In this podcast, we will delve into the controversial life and legacy of Ebrahim Raisi, the recently deceased President of Iran. Raisi lost his life in a helicopter crash. I lost no sleep over the news, and like many in the Middle East, have little sorrow. Raisi was a figure shrouded in both reverence and infamy. In the West, he may not be a household name, but within Iran and among human rights circles, he was better known by a chilling moniker, the Butcher of Tehran. This title was not unwarranted, as his rise to power was marked by a trail of bloodshed and severe human rights abuses. Throughout this podcast, we'll take an in-depth look at the path that led him to become one of Iran's most feared leaders. We'll explore his early years and educational journey, uncovering how he became radicalized and entered the brutal world of Iranian politics. We'll discuss his initial forays into political roles and the origins of the fearsome reputation that earned him his grim nickname. As we move forward, we'll dissect his judicial career, where his actions would cement his legacy as a harsh enforcer of the regime's will. From his involvement in the notorious 1988 mass executions to other significant judicial decisions, we'll paint a comprehensive picture of a man who wielded power ruthlessly. Additionally, we'll track his rise to political prominence, outlining key alliances and his eventual transition to the presidency. We'll delve into his domestic policies, economic strategies, social governance, and how these affected Iranian society. Furthermore, we'll scrutinize his foreign policy, especially his approach to relations with neighboring countries and international issues. Finally, we'll assess the broader implications of his brutal reign, considering both the short and long-term impacts of his presidency. How did he shape Iran's future, and what legacy does he leave behind? Join us as we uncover the life and times of Ebrahim Raisi, the Butcher of Tehran. Ebrahim Raisi was born on December 14, 1960, in the city of Mashhad, Iran, a place known for its religious significance as the home to the Imam Reza Shrine, a major Shia pilgrimage site. Growing up in a religious family, Raisi's early life was steeped in the teachings and traditions of Shia Islam. His father, Sayyid Haji, was a cleric, which set the path for young Ebrahim's future. From an early age, Raisi was sent to religious schools. His education began in earnest at the Qom Seminary, one of the most prestigious religious institutions in Iran. There, he studied under some of the most influential clerics of the time, including Ayatollah Khomeini, who would later become the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. However, his time in Qom was not just limited to religious study. The seminary was a hotbed of political activity, particularly in the fervor leading up to the Iranian Revolution of 1979. The young cleric found himself increasingly involved in political discussions and activities. The overthrow of the Shah and the establishment of an Islamic Republic under Khomeini's leadership were pivotal events that further radicalized Raisi. He became fervently committed to the revolutionary ideal of establishing an Islamic state governed by Sharia law. Raisi's radicalization was not merely academic or ideological, it was also shaped by the tumultuous environment of post-revolution Iran. The new regime faced numerous internal and external challenges, including political purges, assassinations, and the Iran-Iraq War. During this period, Raisi saw firsthand the brutal measures taken against perceived enemies of the state. These experiences only solidified his hardline stance and convinced him of the necessity of extreme measures to protect and preserve the Islamic Republic. In the years following the revolution, Raisi completed his religious education and rose quickly through the clerical ranks. By the age of 20, he was already holding significant roles within the judiciary, a testament to his dedication and the trust placed in him by senior leaders of the new regime. The combination of his rigorous religious education, his early exposure to revolutionary politics, and his rapid ascent within the judicial system set the stage for Raisi's future actions and policies. His early life and education not only provided him with a deep understanding of Shia Islam, but also indoctrinated him with a commitment to the revolutionary ideals that would later define his career. To truly understand Ebrahim Raisi's trajectory in Iranian politics, we must delve into his initial political involvement. Raisi's first steps into the political landscape were taken during the turbulent period following the 1979 Iranian Revolution, a time of significant upheaval and transformation for Iran. Fresh out of seminary, Raisi was drawn to the revolutionary fervor that aimed to reshape the nation. Raisi's entry into politics began with his appointment as a prosecutor in the city of Karaj and later Hamadan at a remarkably young age. These positions were endorsed by higher authorities looking to consolidate and stabilize the newly formed Islamic Republic. His early roles involved dealing with the remnants of the Shah's regime and those deemed counter-revolutionaries. It was a foundational experience for Raisi, shaping his hardline stance and firm belief in the revolutionary ideology. Quickly ascending the ranks due to his loyalty and effectiveness, Raisi's prosecutorial skills and ability to enforce the revolutionary government's directives caught the attention of Iran's top political figures. His stringent approach and willingness to take on challenging cases earned him a reputation as a steadfast and uncompromising figure, key traits that defined his political persona. As he moved through various prosecutorial positions, it became clear that Raisi was not just a participant, but a rising star in the Islamic Republic's judiciary and political arena. His early involvement laid the groundwork for a career that would see him play pivotal roles in some of Iran's most controversial periods, shaping his identity as a staunch enforcer of the new regime's laws and policies. This foundation established the path that would eventually lead him to become one of the most influential and polarizing figures in Iran's modern history. The Butcher of Tehran, a moniker that strikes fear and anger in the hearts of many, is a name that Ebrahim Raisi earned through actions that have been both controversial and horrifying. To understand the origin of this nickname, we must delve into the events and decisions that marked Raisi's career, painting a stark picture of his approach to justice and governance. The nickname, the Butcher of Tehran, primarily stems from Raisi's role in the 1988 mass executions, an event often described as one of Iran's darkest days. As a member of the Death Committee, Raisi was instrumental in the systematic execution of thousands of political prisoners. These prisoners, many of whom were simply advocates for political reform or members of opposition groups, were subjected to quick trials with little to no due process. The executions were carried out swiftly and in secret, leaving countless families devastated and a nation grappling with the brutality of its judiciary. Public perception of Raisi has been deeply divided. To his supporters, he is seen as a steadfast protector of the Islamic Revolution's values, a man willing to take harsh measures to safeguard the nation's ideological purity. To his detractors, however, he has always been the Butcher of Tehran, a symbol of the regime's willingness to brutally crush any form of dissent. His involvement in these mass executions has been widely criticized by international human rights organizations which have called for accountability and justice for the victims. The controversy surrounding Raisi extends beyond the 1988 executions. Throughout his career, he has held various high-ranking judicial positions where his decisions continue to reflect his hardline stance. For instance, his time as Prosecutor General and later as the head of the judiciary of Iran saw a continued pattern of harsh sentencing, widespread use of the death penalty, and suppression of political activists and journalists. These actions did not go unnoticed on the global stage. Many leaders and human rights advocates across the world have condemned Raisi's legacy, imposing sanctions and holding Iran accountable for its human rights abuses. Despite these criticisms, Raisi's hardline supporters within Iran view his severity as a necessary force to maintain the stability and integrity of the nation amidst internal and external threats. Ebrahim Raisi's nickname, the Butcher of Tehran, is not merely a label. It is a stark reminder of the extreme measures he took to enforce his vision of justice. It encapsulates the fear and repression felt by many Iranian citizens, as well as the international community's demand for accountability. As we continue to explore Raisi's life and career, it becomes increasingly clear how this moniker encapsulates both his ruthless efficiency and the horrific human cost of his actions. Ebrahim Raisi's early career is marked by a rapid ascension within Iran's judicial system, where his particular brand of justice began to take shape. By 1981, at the young age of 21, Raisi was appointed prosecutor in the cities of Karaj and Hamadan, demonstrating an early commitment to the revolutionary ideals that had swept across Iran in 1979. His involvement in the judiciary allowed him to become entrenched in a system that would later facilitate his rise to power. Raisi's judicial roles were notable not just for his youth, but for his zeal in carrying out the regime's directives. By the mid-1980s, he had been promoted to deputy prosecutor of Tehran, where he wielded significant influence. It was here that Raisi's use of power to execute political dissenters began to cement his reputation. He played a key role in the mass execution of thousands of political prisoners in 1988, an event that remains a dark chapter in Iranian history. The 1988 executions were partially justified under the pretense of purging the country of leftist political prisoners and members of the MEK, Mojahedin-e-Khalq. Raisi's unflinching implementation of these orders demonstrated his ruthless adherence to the regime's ideological purity, earning him the moniker, the Butcher of Tehran. His reputation for brutality only grew as he continued to take on more prominent judicial roles. Raisi's early career, defined by his swift promotions and unyielding approach to justice, laid the foundation for his later political ascendancy. His willingness to employ extreme measures in the name of the revolution set a precedent for his future actions and policies, shaping both his personal legacy and the Iranian judiciary for years to come. Ebrahim Raisi's entry into the judiciary marked the beginning of a trajectory that would leave a significant and often brutal imprint on Iran's legal and political landscape. He began his career in the late 1970s, just as the Iranian Revolution was reshaping the nation's government. The new regime, under Ayatollah Khomeini, was eager to fill positions with devout followers willing to implement the Islamic judicial system with fervor and discipline. Raisi quickly proved himself as one of those staunch supporters. He started as an assistant prosecutor in Karaj, a suburb of Tehran, at merely age 20. His dedication and strict interpretation of Islamic laws did not go unnoticed. By the early 1980s, he had secured the position of chief prosecutor in Karaj and later in Hamadan. These early roles saw Raisi establishing a reputation for his harsh and uncompromising enforcement of the new regime's legal codes. As his career progressed, Raisi was appointed as the deputy prosecutor of Tehran, a significant leap in his judicial journey. This role placed him at the center of the Iranian judicial system during a turbulent period marked by internal purges and political executions. It was here that Raisi began to be noticed for his participation in notoriously severe and controversial decisions, which would later haunt his public image. In the years that followed, Raisi held a series of key positions that solidified his influence. He served as the head of the General Inspection Office, where he was responsible for overseeing government corruption cases, and later as the head of the State Inspectorate Organization. Each role expanded his power and allowed him to exercise his rigid interpretation of justice on a wider scale. One of his most significant and controversial appointments came in 1988 when he became a member of the Death Commission, responsible for the mass execution of political prisoners, a role that earned him the moniker, the Butcher of Tehran. His involvement in this period remains one of the most debated and condemned aspects of his career. Raisi's ascent through the judiciary ranks showcased not just his legal acumen, but also his unwavering commitment to the principles of the Islamic Republic, often at the cost of human rights and judicial fairness. These early and pivotal roles set the stage for his later political and judicial appointments, demonstrating a pattern of ruthless dedication to state power. Ebrahim Raisi's judicial career is marked by some of the most controversial and significant cases in the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran, none more infamous than the 1988 mass executions. Often referred to as the 1988 massacre, this brutal purge involved the systematic execution of thousands of political prisoners across Iran. Raisi, then a deputy prosecutor in Tehran, was appointed to a special committee tasked with these executions. The directive came from Ayatollah Khomeini himself, and Raisi's role placed him in a powerful position to determine the fate of countless prisoners. Reports and testimonies from survivors indicate that prisoners were brought before these committees, known as death commissions, and were given perfunctory trials, often lasting mere minutes. Prisoners accused of supporting opposition groups, primarily the People's Mujahedin Organization of Iran, PMOI-MEK, were often handed immediate execution orders. Raisi's unwavering commitment to enforcing these decrees earned him a reputation as a hardliner, unafraid to wield his power ruthlessly. Raisi's involvement in these mass executions has been condemned internationally, with many human rights organizations labeling the acts as crimes against humanity. These organizations have called for Raisi to be held accountable for his role in the atrocities. Despite the wide criticism, Raisi has consistently defended his actions, asserting that they were necessary to safeguard the Islamic Republic during a time of political turmoil and internal dissent. Beyond the 1988 massacre, Raisi presided over various other judicial decisions that underscored his severe approach to justice. These include his role in numerous political trials, where activists, journalists, and dissidents faced harsh penalties, including long prison sentences and, in some cases, execution. His tenure in the judiciary was characterized by a strict interpretation of Islamic law, which often translated into severe punishments for those deemed to have transgressed. Another notable case was his involvement in the crackdowns on the 2009 Green Movement protests, where he played a part in the arrests and trials of several reformist leaders and protesters. The harsh sentences handed down during these trials only further cemented Raisi's image as a judicial hardliner. Raisi's judicial decisions have had a long-lasting impact on Iran's legal system and society. By prioritizing state security and religious orthodoxy over fair judicial processes, Raisi's legacy in the judiciary is one marked by fear and repression. His actions have left an indelible mark on the lives of countless Iranians and continue to contribute to the complex and often painful history of the Islamic Republic. Raisi's adept maneuvering within Iran's political labyrinth culminated in his successful bid for the presidency in 2021. His campaign capitalized on widespread economic discontent and leveraged his judicial reputation to promise a crackdown on corruption and inefficiency. Throughout this period, Raisi maintained crucial support from the Revolutionary Guard, the Basij militia, and conservative religious institutions, all of whom played instrumental roles in his political career. In summary, Ebrahim Raisi's rise to prominence was no accident. It was the result of deliberate and strategic actions, fortified by key alliances and an unwavering commitment to the conservative ideals of Iran's political establishment. His journey reflects the complexities of Iranian politics, where influence and power are often as much about relationships and perceptions as they are about public policies and governance. On the social front, Raisi's policies were deeply influenced by his conservative ideological stance. His administration prioritized traditional values and sought to enforce strict social norms. Measures were implemented to control the cultural landscape, including tighter regulations on media content, increased censorship, and a strong stance against perceived Western cultural influences. This heightened sense of control extended to the streets, where morality police resumed operations with greater vigor, leading to public discontent and sporadic clashes. Raisi's government also targeted social welfare programs in an attempt to alleviate the plight of the most vulnerable. Subsidies on essential goods were maintained and in some cases expanded despite economic pressures. Efforts were made to improve healthcare access in rural areas and to provide additional support to large families. Yet, these efforts often fell short of counteracting the broader economic difficulties and did little to improve the overall quality of life for many Iranians. Ebrahim Raisi's campaign for the presidency was marked by a blend of assertive rhetoric and calculated promises designed to galvanize conservative support, while attempting to appeal to a broader electorate disillusioned by economic hardship and political instability. Central to Raisi's campaign strategy was his emphasis on anti-corruption. He positioned himself as a fervent critic of the existing political elites, pledging to purge the government of corrupt officials and restore integrity to Iran's institutions. This resonated with many Iranians who had grown tired of pervasive corruption scandals. Raisi also promised to revive the Iranian economy, which had been crippled by international sanctions and mismanagement. He put forth a populist economic agenda, vowing to create jobs, reduce inflation, and improve living standards. His promises included significant increases in welfare spending, subsidies for essential goods, and the implementation of policies to support domestic industries. Despite these promises, Raisi's candidacy was not without significant controversy. Allegations of voter suppression and political manipulation marred the election process. Reports emerged of candidates being disqualified disproportionately, particularly those from reformist and moderate factions, thus skewing the competition in favor of hardliners like Raisi. Moreover, Raisi's candidacy faced international scrutiny due to his involvement in human rights abuses, specifically his role in the 1988 mass executions of political prisoners.
That has gained momentum.
Under the presidency of Ebrahim Raisi, Iran experienced a series of controversial and impactful domestic policies that left a lasting imprint on the nation's socio-economic fabric. Raisi's tenure was marked by assertive economic reforms aimed at addressing deep-seated issues within the Iranian economy. He sought to combat inflation and stabilize the currency by emphasizing self-sufficiency and reducing dependency on foreign imports. However, his aggressive approach often included stringent fiscal policies and austerity measures that led to widespread public discontent. On the social front, Raisi's conservative ideologies were heavily reflected in his administration's policies. He initiated numerous regulations that reinforced traditional Islamic values, limiting social freedoms and imposing stricter dress codes and behavior guidelines, particularly targeting women. Public spaces became arenas of enforcement, with increased surveillance and policing to uphold these regulations. His administration's measures to control internet usage and restrict access to foreign media also drew criticism, as they were perceived as attempts to stifle dissent and limit freedom of expression. Raisi's presidency was also marked by a grim human rights record, characterized by an uptick in executions and harsh crackdowns on dissent. Activists, journalists, and political opponents frequently found themselves targets of state repression. This period saw numerous reports of arbitrary detentions, torture, and forced confessions, further tarnishing his already controversial image. The international community and various human rights organizations consistently condemned these violations, labeling his governance as oppressive and autocratic. Despite Raisi's promises of economic revival and social stability, the reality of his policies often led to increased unrest and resistance. Mass protests erupted in response to economic hardships and social restrictions, with citizens demanding greater freedoms and an end to governmental malpractice. The administration's heavy-handed response to these demonstrations only fueled further discontent and drew even more international scrutiny. In summary, Ebrahim Raisi's domestic policies and governance were a contentious blend of economic reform, stringent social regulation, and severe human rights abuses. His tenure was marked by efforts to fortify Iran's economic position, revive traditional social norms, and quash dissent through ruthless enforcement, creating a legacy of division and unrest within the country. Ebrahim Raisi's tenure in Iranian politics, particularly as president, was marked by a distinct approach to foreign policy. His relations with neighboring countries were defined by a combination of traditional alliances, strategic rivalry, and a firm stance on sovereignty and independence from Western influence. Raisi maintained a close bond with countries like Russia and China, seeing them as vital allies in countering Western pressure. This relationship was cemented through various economic and strategic partnerships, including significant trade deals and joint military exercises aimed at bolstering Iran's position on the global stage. With regard to neighboring Gulf states, Raisi's policy was a blend of cautious diplomacy and assertive rhetoric. While he aimed to smooth over relations with countries like Qatar and Oman, known for their somewhat balanced stance towards Iran, his approach towards Saudi Arabia remained contentious. Persistent tensions were fueled by historical animosities and competition for regional dominance, particularly in conflicts like those in Yemen and Syria. Raisi's administration was also notably involved in enhancing ties with Iraq. He sought to strengthen political and economic connections, viewing Iraq as a crucial partner in maintaining regional stability and economic vitality. However, this relationship wasn't without its frictions, as Iraq's own internal dynamics often complicated the alliance. In terms of broader international issues, Raisi was a staunch opponent of Western sanctions. He frequently condemned these measures, describing them as unjust and harmful to the Iranian populace. His rhetoric against the United States and its allies remained harsh, emphasizing Iran's right to continue its nuclear program for what he termed peaceful purposes. Moreover, Raisi prioritized fostering closer relationships with non-aligned nations and sought to position Iran as a leading voice in the developing world. His speeches often highlighted themes of resistance against Western hegemony and promoting a multipolar world order. Overall, Ebrahim Raisi's foreign policy was characterized by a blend of strategic alliances, regional power plays, and an unwavering stance against Western pressure. This approach aimed at preserving Iran's autonomy while attempting to navigate the intricate web of international relations. Ebrahim Raisi's legacy is marred by an array of controversies and criticisms, particularly surrounding human rights violations. Known to many as the Butcher of Tehran, Raisi has been accused of being a central figure in several brutal crackdowns, most notably the 1988 mass executions where thousands of political prisoners were systematically killed. Human rights organizations have consistently highlighted his role in these events, emphasizing the swift and clandestine nature of the trials that led to such widespread loss of life. Under Raisi's tenure, reports of arbitrary detentions, extensive use of solitary confinement, and torture as a method of extracting confessions were rampant. His judicial record is littered with instances where due process was ignored and dissent was met with extreme punitive measures. The responses from Raisi and his administration have often been defensive, framing their actions as necessary measures to maintain national security and public order. They have repeatedly denied any wrongdoing, claiming that the accusations are part of a broader effort by international adversaries to undermine the Islamic Republic. Despite substantial evidence and numerous testimonies from survivors and families of victims, Raisi himself has remained unrepentant, often justifying the executions and other severe measures as acts of preserving the revolution and its values. Public perception of Raisi within Iran is deeply divided. While a segment of the population views him as a steadfast guardian of the nation's ideological purity and a stalwart against external and internal threats, a growing number of Iranians, particularly younger generations and human rights activists, view him as a symbol of repression and authoritarianism. The public outcry against his policies was evident in numerous protests, where chants and slogans directly targeted his legacy of violence and oppression. Internationally, Raisi's rise to power was met with significant condemnation. Multiple human rights organizations, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, have called for investigations into his role in past human rights abuses. Governments in the West, notably the United States and European Union, issued sanctions against Raisi and other high-ranking officials implicated in human rights violations. These sanctions were aimed at voicing strong disapproval and holding these figures accountable, impacting their ability to travel and access international financial systems. In the United Nations, special rapporteurs on human rights in Iran have repeatedly brought up Raisi's controversial record, urging for accountability and transparency. These international reactions have put pressure on Tehran, but they also fortified the regime's narrative of foreign plots against the Islamic Republic. In conclusion, the controversies and criticisms surrounding Ebrahim Raisi highlight a complex and polarizing figure whose actions have left an indelible mark on Iran's recent history. Whether seen as a guardian of the revolution or an emblem of tyranny, his tenure raises crucial questions about power, justice, and accountability in the Islamic Republic of Iran. The immediate effects of Ebrahim Raisi's policies on Iran were profound and multifaceted. As soon as he ascended to the presidency, Raisi's approach to governance became evident through a series of sweeping changes. Economically, he implemented strict measures aimed at stabilizing Iran's struggling financial sector. These included stringent regulations on currency exchange and an attempt to curb inflation through price controls on essential commodities. However, these actions often led to scarcity of goods, and the measures, though well-intentioned, were met with mixed results on the ground level. Socially, Raisi's administration reinforced conservative values, further aligning governmental policies with the hardline views of Iran's religious establishment. This meant more rigorous enforcement of dress codes and public behavior, sparking feelings of suppression among the more liberal segments of the population. Women's rights activists and civil society groups specifically bore the brunt, facing increased pressure and reduced freedoms under his rule. Politically, Raisi continued to sideline reformist elements within the government, consolidating power among hardliners. This move, while bolstering his base, triggered growing disenchantment among those who had hoped for a more moderate administration. The immediate consequence was a surge in public protests and dissent, which his government often met with severe crackdowns. On the international front, Raisi's hardline stance complicated Iran's foreign relations, especially with Western nations. His administration's rigid position on nuclear negotiations hampered the possibility of reaching a diplomatic resolution, leading to ongoing sanctions that further strained Iran's economy. In summary, Raisi's policies rapidly reshaped Iran's landscape, laying bare the stark realities of his governing style. The pressing need to balance stability with reform while addressing the populace's needs became glaringly apparent, as his initial actions set the stage for the broader, long-term impact of his presidency. What will be Ebrahim Raisi's long-term legacy? To understand his impact, one must delve into his policies, actions, and the cultural and historical context within which he operated. While opinions on Raisi are divided, the consequences of his leadership will resonate throughout Iran for years to come. First, let's consider the political landscape. Raisi's tenure reinforced conservative and hardline elements within Iranian politics. His policies often favored maintaining stringent control over political expression and public life. Supporters viewed him as a guardian of Islamic values, upholding the principles of the 1979 revolution, but critics saw this as a regression to authoritarian practices, stifling reformist voices and human rights. Economically, Raisi faced significant challenges. His economic policies aimed at self-sufficiency and resistance to Western sanctions were a mixed bag. While they fostered some degree of local resilience, they also led to increased isolation and inflation. Proponents argue that Raisi instilled a sense of national pride and independence, but detractors point to the hardships faced by ordinary Iranians, exacerbated by spiraling costs and unemployment rates. Socially, Raisi's era was marked by stringent enforcement of moral codes and limited social freedoms. His administration's crackdown on dissent and frequent use of capital punishment drew international condemnation. These actions have cemented a controversial legacy. For some, his tenure is synonymous with social stability and reverence for tradition. Conversely, human rights organizations and many citizens remember his leadership as a period of repression and fear. When it comes to Iran's position on the global stage, Raisi's foreign policy strategies were characterized by antagonism toward Western powers and strengthened ties with allies like Russia and China. This pivot away from the West may carve out a long-lasting influence on Iran's international relations, potentially limiting the country's opportunities for diplomatic and economic partnerships in the future. Ebrahim Raisi's place in history will likely be debated for decades. To his supporters, he may be remembered as a steadfast leader who defended Iran's sovereignty and Islamic identity. To his detractors, he will remain the butcher of Tehran, a symbol of brutal oppression and missed opportunities for progress. In either case, his presidency undeniably marks a significant chapter in Iran's socio-political evolution. As future generations revisit his legacy, the full scope of his impact will become clearer, shaping Iran's trajectory in an ever-changing world. In reflecting on the life and legacy of Ebrahim Raisi, it's clear he left a profound impact on Iran. From his early radicalization and initial political involvement to his rise through the judiciary, where he earned the moniker the Butcher of Tehran, Raisi's reputation was built on a foundation of brutal and controversial decisions. His role in the 1988 mass executions and other significant judicial actions marked him as a feared and polarizing figure. As he ascended politically, forming key alliances and stepping into higher roles, Raisi shaped and enforced policies that deeply affected Iranian society and economy. His presidency was characterized by significant economic reforms, social policies, and a stark human rights record. Internationally, his foreign policy stance and dealings with neighboring countries further cemented his contentious legacy. He is a figure that will not be missed. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me via my website, awesomeseminars.com. Until next time,